Good morning. So today, our gospel reading is likely very familiar. Jesus asked, "Which is the greatest commandment?" by a lawyer. I like to think the lawyer's just being helpful. For those of you who are in the Read the Bible in a Year program, I know that after our readings of Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and all of these laws, that probably many of you would really like Jesus just to point to one or two and say, these are the main ones. Don't worry about the rest. And in this passage, Jesus does that. He sums up all the laws in what is called the Great Commandment. It has three parts. The first is, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Part two is love your neighbor. And part three, which we often overlook, is as you love yourself. We've been talking about this commandment in different ways for weeks. Doyd is focused on part one, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, in his Forum series, right? It's a three-part series. First one was last week. We've got two more coming up in November. So that's the first part. Recent sermons, we've been focusing on loving others. So today, what I really want to focus on is the third part of this commandment, where it says, as you love yourself. We are to love others as we love ourselves. Many would say that we need to love ourselves so that we can love others. So I want to ask you a question. How do you love yourself? How? How do you love yourself? This idea of loving ourselves can feel really hard. And I don't think we talk enough about the importance of loving ourselves in church. Because in church, we often hear things like an admonition that says that we need to die to ourselves so that we can live in Christ. Or as Christians, we think that we need to love God and serve others. And, we're the last. We don't have to love us. But Jesus says that we have to love others as we love ourselves. Loving ourselves is not an option. There are different things that come to mind when we think about how or why we should love ourselves. On the one hand, maybe we love ourselves based on the things that we have achieved or attained, like our education, our wealth, our success, and maybe having lots of friends. These are good things. So if we have them, we should love ourselves, right? If we just do enough, well enough, surely that should translate into love. Instagram and the media would say that loving ourselves is a matter of self-care, right? There's this huge industry out there just waiting to teach you how to love yourself. But frankly, it's just another list of things to do or to achieve. You just need to set boundaries or exercise, eat right, rest, meditate, etc., etc., etc. The list goes on and on. And I think that these lists, they actually leave me more tired and feeling more like I am not enough. They certainly do not help me love myself more. Or maybe you feel like you can't love yourself because of disappointments, broken relationships, or hard times. It's almost like there is a secret to loving ourselves in the way that Jesus speaks of. Meister Eckhart is a 13th century German theologian and mystic, and one of my absolute favorites, says that Jesus alludes to this secret in some of his parables. In two parables, Jesus tells of the story of the hidden treasure and the pearl of great price. In the parable of finding treasure in the field, Jesus describes a person who discovers a hidden treasure that is buried in a field and with great joy sells everything that he has so that he could obtain the treasure. And in the second parable, the person who finds the pearl of great price went and sold all he had to buy it. In both cases, these pilgrims had something really valuable, and they went to great lengths to be able to obtain it. Meister Eckhart teaches us that this great secret, is that the treasure that is spoken of in these parables is within us. That this pearl of great price buried in the field of our lives is our soul, our true being that has been with us all along. Now, I don't know if you are tired of hearing about the soul, or if when you hear the word soul, you tune out. I want to encourage you to grab this concept and go really deep with it. The idea of the soul is the foundation to how we understand our being, our value, the value of others, and how we relate to the world. All of these things are wrapped up in the concept of the soul. It is a theological framework that works. We each have a soul, and more than this, we are a soul. Knowing our soul and being able to see it for what it is, the imago Dei, the image of God, our God part, that is the pearl of great price. This is the gift that we receive at our first breath, the deposit of God's image, and it is in us and remains with us forever. Our journey is to learn to embrace our soul as our true self. In the parables, the treasure and the pearl of great price were purchased. But of course, the knowledge and embracing our own soul cannot be purchased. Buying or paying dollars would actually be much easier. Instead, this great pearl of beholding ourselves as we truly are requires that we give up a lot for it. And it's much harder than writing a check. We have to give up our self-image and our ambition. We work so hard to achieve. It's understandable that these achievements define us to ourselves and to others. We have to give up the need to plead our case of why we are worthy or good. We must let go of everything that we thought we had in order to see our true meaning. And we have to give up self-condemnation. Our task is not that of accumulating, but it is of letting go of all of the externalities and entrapments. And the tighter we hold on to those things that we think that define us, our education, our success, and maybe even our failures, the further away we get from the true secret of loving ourselves. And this can be hard because we judge ourselves on so many things. We strive, we feel satisfied, we wrap ourselves in stories that we tell about ourselves. And some of these stories might make us feel like we should love ourselves, and some of the stories will make us feel unloved. But I am convinced that we cannot truly love ourselves based on any achievement, possession, or story. First, these things are all temporal. If that is the basis of our self-love, then we will always be at risk of losing it. Second, it's a fiction. Nothing that we have done, own, or do really changes the way that we speak to ourselves in the quiet moments when we are really alone and honest. As part of my training to become a priest, I served as a chaplain at various places. In one of my sites, I worked with patients with dementia, and most were nonverbal. I was very new at my chaplain job, and I was also very aware that I really didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. I was learning a lot, and one of the things that I was learning was about this ministry of presence. So I didn't have to do or say anything. I just needed to be there. I told myself that it was valuable because people were not alone, and that counts. One day, I had a particularly odd visit with a woman who barely talked, but would yell periodically. And her name was Steve. Her yelling startled me. I didn't know what it meant, and I didn't know if I was causing her distress. And this was really hard because the last thing that I wanted to do was cause anybody discomfort or distress. And so after a while with this patient, maybe 4 yells, I got up to go. I reached over and grabbed her hand. As a chaplain, I started out being very nervous to touch people. I felt like I shouldn't touch them without their explicit consent. And in fact, I've told many people that in the corporate settings. And yet, this was really hard because the people I worked with, many of them they couldn't hear, they couldn't talk. And so trying to engage in this conversation to get consent to touch just felt, impossible to do. And this visit that I had with Steve changed this for me. I grabbed her hand, and I didn't ask. I just grabbed it. I didn't ask because I frankly hadn't been successful reaching her. I was just trying to get out of the room. When I grabbed her hands, her eyes were full of life, and they flashed at me. And we were looking eye to eye with this really deep connection. I was so surprised. I was just trying to get out, and then I was hit with a stare that I could feel at the bottom of my shoes. Steve was looking at me soul to soul. She saw me and acted as a mirror so that I saw myself. In that moment, I saw myself as an uncurated soul. Steve did not care or know where I went to school or what kind of job I had. She didn't know that I had kids or that I love being a mother. Nothing about me or my curated life mattered to Steve. It was a soul connection. I was seen and known for what I am, the image of God. And that is the secret to loving ourselves. We must see what God sees. We must see what Steve saw. So why does this matter? Why do you have to love yourself anyway? Well, first, because Jesus says you do. But secondly, because you can't see the Imago Dei and believe that other people are a soul, no matter what else is happening in their life, unless you can see it in yourself first. Maybe you think as long as I love other people, I don't have to really love myself. And that's just not true. So how do we do it? So I think that this is something that you just know and know. I think it's a choice to know. It's something you just believe. Does meditation and having a practice of silence help you touch your soul? Yeah, probably. Does being in creation and seeing the majesty of God help you connect with your own soul? Yeah. But you don't have to go and do. You don't have to create a list of, I am now going to find my soul. It's really something you choose to believe. By faith, you choose to know. And this is our work. When we know ourselves for who and what we are, we do love ourselves. Understanding ourselves as souls created in the Imago Dei, in the image of God, fundamentally transforms the way we perceive and engage with our own existence. We come to recognize the inherent worth and the divine essence within. This recognition is not an exercise in narcissism or self-esteem, but a deep acknowledgement of the sacredness infused within our very being. The love we extend to ourselves is not rooted in ego, but in divine understanding that we are partakers in the divine nature, called to reflect and embody the love and compassion inherent in our loving Creator. In loving ourselves as souls in the Imago Dei, we participate in a divine dance of grace, cultivating a love that then can radiate outwards and healing and reconciling a world in need. So let us go forth, empowered by the knowledge that our self-love, rooted in the immeasurable love of God, has the power to transform both our lives and the lives of those around us.